Hi, and welcome to the Games and Social Justice Public Lecture Series. My name is Biz Nydam, and I will be your host for this afternoon's programming. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered on traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people here at UBC's Point Grey campus. And this programming today and the class it's embedded in was very much inspired by my work in Indigenous studies as I strove to find ways to connect the goals of truth and reconciliation with my research and teaching in popular media. I hope that you will continue to attend this lecture series over the next 3 months to learn more about how looking at the intersection of games and social justice can foster discourses on Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. Today's programming has been embedded in my 4th year Bachelor of Media Studies seminar and is sponsored by the Popular Media for Social Change Research Excellence Cluster, otherwise known as the Pop Culture Cluster. In this public lecture series, local, national, and international speakers will explore various approaches to video games, tabletop games, and tarot, including game design, gameplay, and fan cultures, to examine how gaming cultures on the one hand perpetuate bias, prejudice, and problematic power dynamics, and on the other are capable in intervening in discourses of oppression, heteronormativity, and settler colonialism. We have also commissioned a local artist, Sarah Draws a Crowd, to live draw events and provide a graphic recording of our time together. Her drawings will be projected in real time whenever possible, and then we'll compile the graphics at the end of the series and host them on our website as another form of documentation. I'm very excited to introduce our speakers today, who will be presenting on card-based community practices, Candie Tanaka and Laura Fukumoto. They will both be speaking about the social justice possibilities of communal card-based games like Hanafuda and tarot. Candie Tanaka is the artist author of Hanafuda, and they are also the author of Baby Drag Queen, which was a finalist for the City of Vancouver Book Award. Candie is a multiracial trans writer, artist, and librarian, challenging the binaries continually reconstructed between self and other while exploring archive and memory in socio-political context. They are a creative writing graduate of the Writers Studio program at Simon Fraser University and have a BFA in Intermedia from Emily Carr Institute of Art and Design. Their first YA book, Baby Drag Queen, was published with Orca Books in April 2023. They've also published work in resonance essays on the craft of life and writing with Anvil Press, and This Will Only Take a Minute, Canadian flash fiction with Guernica Editions. Then, Laura Fukumoto settled in so-called Vancouver more than 15 years ago and is committed to loving and living in this place. Theater artist and poet, she gets paid to talk sometimes, and we are happy to be that sometime today. Laura has published poetry and articles with Subterranean Wordworks magazine, Vancouver Pride Mag, and a forthcoming anthology, The Gate of Memory, with Haymarket Books in April 2025. With a BFA in theater and the Writers Studio at SFU, when we are to ask about her, ask her about Viagra Nation. I guess we'll have to keep that for a Q&A question. Yeah, already in the bio, we have the first question. Laura has been the governance coordinator for 221A or 221A, either or, Artist Run Center since the beginning of 2023, and is grateful to support the relationship building and mission of 221A. Thank you so much. I know, Laura, you're going to be speaking first, and then Candie, you'll be joining us on stage. So thank you very much.
Will I suddenly be loud?
Oh, you are suddenly?
Oh boy, exciting. So now I think this needs to go to the other slides.
It's not this one? Okay.
No, not this
Cal's got it under.
Cal's got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe. Hello. Hi, friends. Nice to see you. Hello, everyone. What a cool course you're in. This is great. Does anyone in this room, just so I get a sense, Put your hand up if you have a tarot card deck. Okay. Only a couple? Come on. Oh my goodness, we're gonna have so much fun today. Is there anyone here for whom tarot, if you had a tarot card deck at home when you were growing up, would you have gotten in trouble for that? If you wanna, yeah. Me. I grew up religious. I got in trouble for having a tarot deck at home as a child. I shall tell you about that. Hello, it's nice to meet you. I'm Laura, local cryptid. I put that in as a joke, but what do? I started off in theater as a designer. Sometimes I act. These days, I've started saying, I will do well what you pay me well to do. So today, I'm telling you about how I got a tarot deck as a child from the sale bin at Chapters, and how it actually does help me in figuring out my path as an artist, especially in this sometimes feels like a hellscape city of Vancouver, but ultimately I do love living here. That's my hot take of the day. This one needs to go as well. I don't think it is going. Aha, okay. So what are tarot cards? I believe you're going to have a lecture later about the history of them. So I just wanted to show you briefly that there's thousands of years of history related to playing cards and how they've traveled throughout the world. So these are thought to be what tarot cards are based off of. They're Mamluk cards. I wanted to show you the art of these cards because they're beautiful. And I think that's one thing about all tarot decks. There are so many different tarot decks now, but every deck is beautiful and worthy of meditation. So I really encourage you to look up some different decks. Here are some basics, just so we have some common language. So they have existed, as I said, for thousands of years. The understanding of divinatory practice, divination, and using tarot, that probably emerged during the Italian Renaissance, and that's how we got the cards as they exist today. So tarot decks are split into the major arcana and the minor arcana, which the minor arcana further has 4 suits. So like a regular deck of cards, they're split into these 4 different suits. Further to that, the 4 suits are cups or chalices, wands or staves. You'll sometimes see swords and pentacles. And each of those correspond to an element. So that helps people sometimes interpret the meaning of the cards. But more than anything, all of the cards in whatever deck that you might be working from, they have a lot of symbolism built into them, and they work with archetype. So this gives us frameworks for telling stories when we pull a spread of tarot cards, maybe for ourselves, maybe for a friend. It gives us the framework for how we are telling stories to each other. And then just to give you an idea of a spread, sometimes, some friends will just pull 1 card a day just to say, what's today going to be about? Maybe they pull 3 cards to answer a specific question. If you are doing something a little bit more in depth, so the Celtic cross is usually like if someone's like, I'm learning how to read tarot cards, how do I read tarot cards? This is usually a spread that people will start with. Another card that is underneath the number 1, the first card there. Often people will choose one card to represent themselves. So this is called the significator. It's the card that represents you in the world of tarot as you lay it out on the table. So that I'll usually pull out, or if I'm reading for a friend, I'll put 5 or 6 cards that I think feels like them, and I'll say which one feels like you today, and I'll put their significator underneath card number 1. So this is how I will usually read cards for myself, because yeah, I've just started reading cards when I was 10. Yes, I still use the little book to help me read tarot. I am not so good to memorize absolutely everything. But on the left, in the main cross area, I like to look at that as this is the main stage of the story. It is you in the center, and maybe you've asked a question. So that number 1 will say is you, and what crosses you is something that's a barrier, that's something that's stopping you up. 3 is what crowns you. So that is maybe your ideal outcome in the matter. It's maybe your higher self, but it's something that you are conscious of, something that you're aware of already. Below you, I think of it as like your treasure chest of skills. This is your subconscious. These are things that you are not always aware of, but fills in the story as well. 5 and 6 are the current actions that are coming into play. So 5 is what has just happened, and 6 is what's going to happen coming into action right now that you know about. So that on the left, it kind of paints a story, or sometimes you can paint a story for yourself from those cards. And then 7, 8, 9, 10. So I read something interesting that said the Celtic cross maybe is meant to be like the 10 is below. So it's actually meant to be like the actual Celtic cross, which is a very tall cross. Who knows? But most people don't have big giant tables like that. It's very hard to fit them all on the table. So 7 and 8, 7 are your feelings, and 8 are the feelings of your house or the people around you. 9 is your hopes and fears. And 10 is supposedly the future. So does anyone have any questions at this point about any of that? Yeah. Has anyone had their future told, their palms read? Yeah, okay. Okay. I see you spooky people. Very good. So tarot has been a tool of spiritual guidance, using common figures from mythology and symbols. So the Rider-Waite tarot deck, which I've already showed you some images from, they use a lot of Greek and Roman mythology, pagan, the Judeo-Islamic Christian world of symbols. So it is like truly a lot of different symbols all mishmashed together. And it can be very fun. Like, I think when I was younger, I would read tarot for people, and people would get like really like kind of spooked out a little bit. And it doesn't necessarily have to be you know, like you dim all of the lights in the room and you light a bunch of candles, but I do guarantee that like ups the fun a lot to light some candles while you do that. But yeah, and so how does this intersect with my work as an artist? Who I am as an artist, I do many different things. I mostly am writing poetry these days, but I have done costume design and theater for many years. I really love learning about mycology, and I think all of this is connected. I'm trying to learn more about the world around me. So I also have done work in the realm of my Japanese Canadian heritage. So a lot of the projects I've worked on in the last 5 or so years have looked at the legacy of internment. So my grandmother, who is 103 now, Grandma Kay was born in Prince Rupert, and she was interned during World War II in Slocan. My grandfather was a resident of Vancouver, and then his whole family were also interned in Slocan. So my family ties, when the Japanese Canadian side of my family immigrated to Canada, were all in Vancouver. So that's something that I didn't know until after I moved here. And a lot of my artistic work has been exploring my connections to Vancouver and my family history here. Yeah, I think career path is an interesting thing. I wanted to spend a moment to talk to you all in the beginnings of your learning and thinking about career paths. Artists don't really have a career path all the time, per se. Like, it is not clear how you don't just get an entry-level job and work your way up through one company. Those jobs for artists are rare or non-existent. So tarot for me throughout my childhood and up until now actually gives me moments of being able to meditate on questions, being able to pause and think through what are my next steps here. So it's truly a good personal tool when I don't know what's coming around the corner sometimes. Let's see. What else do I say? Yeah. Holding on to purpose and direction as an artist is a bit like navigating the open sea without a compass. That's my point. That's what I wrote down. Okay, what's next? That's me, not a witch. So I was a spooky child. I liked to play with fire, and my mother was like, "What are you doing over there?" I was just being cool. I think I watched The Craft when I was too young. So the other piece of tarot, and I think why I ended up in the theater, is because I like to engage in play, that imaginary play that makes me feel powerful. So for me, it doesn't matter whether or not someone is actually psychic when you are engaging with tarot, like whether you believe that or not. There are some people who believe magic is real. I think there are things that are inexplicable in this world. And isn't it more fun to just believe in something a little bit bigger than yourself? So that on the right is me being my best self. I think I peaked at that moment. It was great. It was a play reading. And you too can have lots of fun. Okay, here are all the decks that I have ever loved in my life. Has anyone seen this TV show? It's ridiculous. It's so cute. So when I was 10 and I was watching a terrible dubbed version of Cardcaptor Sakura, I was actually at Chapters looking for this magical book. I was like, surely this magical book will find me in the world and I, a magical girl, will have my tarot cards. I still don't own the Clow, unfortunately. But I did buy this deck. This was the first deck I bought from a Chapters sale bin. It wasn't what I thought a tarot deck should look like. I was thinking they were like more cutesy, like Cardcaptor Sakura, and instead I found the Fairy Oracle, which has art by Brian Froud, and the book is written by Jessica Macbeth. The card on the side there, the Green Woman, that was a card that I often felt drawn to as a 10-year-old. These cards also have a lot of casual fairy nudity and like nipples and things like that. So as a 10-year-old child, I was like, this feels secret. This feels transgressive. This feels like my mom would get mad at me if she actually knew what I was doing, talking to fairies in my bedroom at night. So I ended up gifting this deck to my friend Amy when I was 16. So there's also like some lore attached to tarot, like if you receive a deck as a gift from a friend, like it's more meaningful in that way than buying it from the sale bin at Chapters. So it was a meaningful gift to be able to give this to a friend when we were teenagers. So I didn't spend a lot of time with these cards. It was the Rider-Waite-Smith deck that I spent a lot of time with. I just really liked this meme. It was funny. Strength was a card that I chose as my significator throughout my 20s. Yeah, the image spoke to me a lot. I think that at that time in my life, I was doing a lot of emotional labor for men. I think I felt drawn to the like, give it back, you little shit, like trying to fight a lion. And that like felt like a higher version of myself. We don't do this emotional labor anymore, or we try very hard not to. But the art, Pamela, is her name Pamela Coleman Smith, who did the art? She has a very interesting life biography. She also was a lady of the theater. And she created all of these images at the turn of the 20th century. And that time in art, there was a lot of symbolism in art happening. So we were coming out of the Romantic, like late 1800s, and moving into a lot of Art Nouveau and symbolism movement in Europe. So these are just a few of the cards, and these are like what you will see most often throughout. And let's just move along because I feel like timing is going fast. Okay. I used this deck. The point of this anecdote is that I used my tarot deck in an immersive theater piece in 2017. And it was called Dark Matter. It was at the James Black Gallery, which, if you know that gallery, it is a haunted house, but like probably lots of good spirits. And so I played a witch, and I sat in a bathtub, and I like used a bunch of Lush bath bombs and made it like black goo. And then I read people's tarot cards as they like came through the bathroom, and there was lots of candles everywhere. And then apparently I just like scared the crap out of someone so much that she made fan art of me. So I remember pulling the card for her, and actually what I said, and we did 20 or back. We did yeah, I don't know how many performances, but it was like for a week at least. And I remember pulling the Emperor, and I just like I dug in so much to this performance. I did a creepy voice. There were people in black morph suits like hiding in a room full of mannequins without heads. It was like top-notch messy theater. And I got to have a bath every night, so that was great. But I think the thing that I want to say about that is I don't often read tarot in party situations or in group situations anymore. I think there are a lot of people who take it very seriously and take it very personally, and I think it's a big responsibility to be talking to people about whatever feelings might be coming up from the imagery. And I felt very responsible for some of the emotional reactions that were coming up with people, especially if they were drunk and we were at parties. So don't do that. Like feelings are not for drunk party times. But I will say the Pride Tarot, which I have here on the table today, we will bring this out at my house, and all of these cards. So this is a collaborative deck. There's a lot of people who are doing collaborative art decks. So each one of these cards are done by a different artist. So this is a very like lovely deck to just kind of take something away and read something nice. Okay, I'm going to go through this so fast. No? Okay, okay. I have like a small art history anecdote story to tell you about my current significator, which is the magician. So this deck is completely made out of Gustav Klimt's art, and it was gifted to me by my dear friend Jess. Um, so I need to go on an art history sidebar now. Um, so this image of the magician, it is usually depicted by a masculine figure in the Rider-Waite deck. And so I like that it is a lady figure in this deck. As I said, Gustav Klimt, he was part of the symbolist movement at the turn of the 20th century. So the story behind this image is that it's actually one of his studies. So it wasn't the final painting. It was a study done for 3 paintings that were 13 by 20 feet tall, and they were meant for the ceiling of the University of Vienna. They're called the faculty paintings. So on the right, you can see a photograph of this entire painting that they've taken the figure from for this tarot card. So the figure is Hygeia. She's a Greek goddess. You can see that she has a snake, which is a symbol of healing, probably because snakes shed their skin, so it symbolizes rebirth. She's also holding a bowl of medicine. So she's the goddess of sanitation and good health. And then the bowl and the snake is actually the symbol that you'll see pharmacists, that represents pharmacists. You'll also see like a snake and a cup for a lot of medicine bowls. So I just wanted to point out those symbols. And so because of this painting and the other 2 paintings I'm about to show you, Klimt was deemed an absolute pervert by the Austrian government. And the faculty at the University of Vienna said, we can't put these paintings on our ceilings. Like, it's absolutely, like, there's too many naked people. And oh my God, is that a pregnant woman he painted? Like, people were just losing it. So is there anything else I want to say about that? And then these 2, so that one was called Medicine. It was meant to represent the Faculty of Medicine. And then Jurisprudence was supposed to represent the Faculty of Law. And so they saw these images and they were like, he's secretly making fun of us. And the answer is yes, he was. He was commenting on, so in the foreground here, there's an old man and his hands are tied behind his back by an octopus. And then the 3 Furies are enacting judgment on him. And then way in the background, you have 3 women representing truth and justice and law, and they're removed from the process. So people thought, what's this Klimt guy actually saying about us? Much removed from that. It's like they're absolutely beautiful paintings. So the story about what happened to these physical paintings. There is a really awesome arts and culture Google. They're colorized because of AI. So Google did a little AI on them and recolorized them because they were lost in World War II. I believe Nazis stole them and then they burned the castle when they thought they were losing the war. So I really encourage you to read a little bit more about them. But all of these paintings are just full of the symbolism that Klimt is known for, and that serves us quite well in our tarot card readings. Oh, the fun button on that story is that because the government was calling Klimt a big pervert for his paintings, this is a painting called Goldfish, and he told all of his friends it's actually called To My Critics, and it's just a lady mooning them. She is very cheekily looking over her shoulder at the viewer. And this card is the 5 of Swords in my deck, which means petty revenge. Okay. Yes, she is full of petty revenge. Let's see. Okay, that's my art history sidebar. Thank you. Likely not a witch. So my point today, which I'll try to make succinctly, is we use symbols to make sense of things in our lives. Tarot is one of those ways that we can tell these stories about ourselves. And meaning making in our own lives takes time. I think that a lot of us go through periods of our lives where we're asking, what is the meaning of life? And other big existential questions like that. Why do bad things happen to good people? And it is good if you have a place where you can develop that, like for lack of a better word, I'll call it spirituality. Then tarot is it for some people, right? Okay. Also, more symbols. Look at all of these symbols. They all represent big, gigantic stories connected to long, long histories. I'm sure that some of these are very recognizable to you. If they're not, it's worth a wander. So every symbol, I think, even the ones especially tied to religion, are like a thread, a long, long thread that tells thousands of years of history. And symbols are the shortcut that ties us to the length of history that is sometimes completely incomprehensible. Like we can't hold all of these facts in our minds at once. But tarot is a practice of looking at these symbols and looking at all of these disparate facts and weaving them together into a narrative. So my final thoughts that I want to take away about my relationship to tarot and what it means to my everyday life and my art practice. So generationally, symbols do lose their meaning over time. If you don't keep telling these stories, we forget. We forget, why is this picture this way? What does a triangle mean in this context? So stories always shift and change in their retelling. So we do have to constantly retell or relearn or remake, reclaim meaning in symbols in order for them to continue to make some sense. I just wrote you a little something up there. You can read it if you want. What is it all for, indeed? The anecdote about bringing my tarot deck to church camp. I started reading Transgressive Teaching. Is that what it's called? By Bell Hooks. And Teaching to Transgress. And so Bell Hooks writes a series of essays that are really about her approach to pedagogy, how she engages a classroom and methods of learning in the higher education setting. And so often, especially in these hallowed halls of university and our elementary schools and whatever education experiences we may have had growing up, we are taught systems of obedience and compliance. We are taught to regurgitate facts. And Bell Hooks was saying that that's actually not engaged learning, that nobody wants to learn that way. But she said when she tried to teach students using different models, they resisted. And she says, for reasons I cannot explain, it was also full of resisting students who did not want to learn new pedagogical processes, who did not want to be in a classroom that differed in any way from the norm. To these students, transgressing boundaries was frightening. And so I bring that up because when I was a child, I was raised in the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Saints. And if you can imagine, when I was 14, I brought my tarot cards to girls' camp, and I was reading tarot cards for people in my tent, and I got in trouble for that. And the Mormon approach to playing cards and to literally a lot of things actually, like Rubik's Cubes maybe, is that the devil works in combinations. And so the belief there is that you know, gambling and like I think there's a seed of truth to that. Like there's a lot of good to take away from these value systems, but also what that resulted in was that different methods of learning and anything unknown was seen as to be feared or of the devil. And so I was told by the adults around me, don't do that, don't use tarot cards. We don't do that. So when I asked further, though, nobody could actually tell me why they were dangerous. So I continued. I think tarot is a tool for transgressive learning, especially for people who have grown up in institutions and in situations where you have been taught that safety is compliance and safety is obedience. And like, to be clear, I believe that, you know, faith and belief are part of long, beautiful traditions. And I have big respect for those intergenerational traditions and beliefs. But what happens when that story is not serving you and you're like a little queer kid reading tarot cards for your friends in a tent? So tarot also is, I think, pretty integral to me developing an internal voice that was able to tell myself and understand what I felt to be true inside of me when there are a lot of external stories saying, no, 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 this is what's true. You have to just believe it in your heart. So what happens when that is different? And my last note, look, this is, don't read that slide actually. But I read a book called Sad Love by a professor here named Carrie Jenkins, who teaches philosophy. And I think that we can choose to have good lives by looking at bigger pictures and seeing what is serving me, what is not serving me. So eudaimonia is just a big word for not centering single relationships at the center of our lives. So her book, Sad Love, is about rethinking, basing your entire life on centering a romantic relationship, and instead looking more broadly at making choices that are seen as transgressive in order to build deeper, more interconnected relationships. And I believe this relates to tarot because tarot asks us to look at the broader web of stories, meditate on our delicate relationships. Tarot asks us to reflect what feeling is coming up, what images, what relationships feel significant to us, and we are asked to see what is there and what is true in front of us, rather than conform our lives to relationships and external ideas. So that's all I have to share for right now. I would like you to ruminate on what symbols might be meaningful for you. So there's traditions of symbols, and there are symbols that arise from our lives. There are rings that are meaningful. There are animals that are meaningful. So it's always good to take note of that. So thank you so much.
Okay, great, thanks. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm going to be talking to you today about Hanafuda cards, as you can see by my first slide. So here's a quote actually from Sharice Jones, who writes for the LA Times. So basically she says, games, simple as they may seem, play multiple roles in society, and over time, they've assumed a special place within some ethnic groups that use them to not just pass time, but to build relationships and remind people of traditions, which I think is so true of Hanafuda cards. This image right here is actually an image of Yuto Garuta, which is poetry karuta, which is a type of deck of cards. It's traditional Japanese playing cards. And a set of these cards traditionally carries 100 cards in a waka poem. And a waka poem is a type of poetry in classical Japanese literature that's kind of like a tanka or a choka. And it's written that's written on each of them. And basically, the standard collection of poems to use is chosen by a poet in the Kamakura period. which is really interesting. And this game, since the early 20th centuries, has been mostly played on Japanese New Year holidays. The next slide I have for you is Karuta first came to Japan in the late 16th century and was brought by merchants and Jesuits through their trade routes between Europe and East Asia. The earliest evidence of the European suit marked Karuta remains on a few wooden key blocks that they were used for printing outlines of playing cards from around the Tensho period. So they're known as Tensho Karuta. In an Edo period painting of the mid-17th century, the cards were seen as sort of a leisure activity among a tea ceremony. So Portuguese suited playing cards are nearly an extinct suit system that have survived in a few towns, specifically in Sicily and Japan. So that's that card there, that slide. So playing cards, actually I'm just gonna, this here, fogging up a little bit. Playing cards were banned throughout all of Japan when the government deemed multiple aspects of Western culture illegal due to the surge in Christian missionaries from Europe. In order to get around this, the Japanese developed an alternative to playing cards called Hanafuda, which replaced numbers with 12 months of the year. Despite the government eventually banning these as well, the Japanese played the game in secret. Hanafuda originated from Hanawa's Karuta, a flower matching game which was created around the Genkro area in the early Edo period. This set of cards consisted of 400 cards individually and 100 different types of flowers. And this was based on people's images of flowers, birds, the moon, and wind at the time. The game was popular among upper-class women and, according to legend, was invented in the Edo period in the shogunate castle for women and girls of the samurai class. In the mid-Edo period, this deck was then reduced to a more compact version that had 12 suits of 48 sheets or 48 cards that became a woodblock print that was more affordable to women during the Meiji period, and the game Hacha Hacha Hanafuda became popular with everyone and quickly spread around the country and overseas as well. Later on, there were deemed to be too many entertainment choices, so the popularity kind of waned. Gameplay for Hacha Hacha, Hachi Hachi, and Koi Koi styles of play are similar, but not the same. Hachi Hachi is a more complicated game and involves the goal of scoring 88 points while having matching combinations. Koi Koi is more popular in Japan and involves earning points by matching sets as fast as you can. It's possible to win a game as soon as you've completed a set. So a full match consists of 12 games or 12 rounds, and the player with the most points after 12 games is the winner. There are different house rules for each group that plays together. There's also a version called Sakura, which is known as the Hawaiian style of Koi Koi, and it's supposed to be very easy to learn. And I've even heard that there's a Korean version called Go Stop. And I'm going to show you a chart here. So this chart basically shows you a little bit about the scoring. Each card has a different point number, and each set of 4 cards represents 1 month. There are many different ways to keep score, and some of them include using a multiplier. For instance, if your set totals 7 or more points in a single game. This slide shows the basic sort of setup for gameplay for Koi Koi. So just to kind of give you a brief overview of the rules, both players draw 1 card from the deck to see who goes first. The highest point number is the parent card, or the parent, or the dealer. And if the dealer deals 8 cards to the child and themselves, 8 communal cards are placed in the center of the table in 2 rows of 4 and are known as the field. Funny thing is that Tanaka actually means middle of the rice field and is the 4th most common name in Japan. So I'm just throwing that in there. The remaining cards stay in a draw pile called the mountain, or yama in Japanese. So players first check the field for matches in turn by taking those cards and placing them face up in front of them. If no match is found, that player draws from the pile and then must discard 1 to the field. The Joker card can be used to match any suit. Whoever has a match in that round wins the round and becomes the dealer for the next round. So an interesting thing here is that Hanafuda cards feature flowers and foliage from throughout the year. So Nintendo was actually one of the first companies that made Hanafuda cards, or made them popular, actually. So in the late 1800s, Japan finally lifted the ban that they had on playing cards, And an avid Hanafuda player named Fusajiro was thrilled to be able to play the game again and open up a company that would distribute high quality cards. And that's how Nintendo got its gaming start, believe it or not. So an important player in popularizing the Hanafuda cards in the 19th century is now the video game giant Nintendo. The cards were first produced and painted on mulberry tree bark, which is kind of interesting. So it did take a while for them to catch on at first, but eventually the Yakuza began to use them in gambling parlors, and card games became popular again in Japan. The flower cards were used specifically by the Yakuza, and they had tattoo designs kind of on them, and the peony was known to symbolize wealth and nobility. So there are special editions now being produced today, such as the Mario version, Pokemon and Snoopy, etc. But so, you know, that's really interesting. And here's a little image of the cute Mario deck. So Nintendo developed many different Hanafuda decks, each one featuring different designs. The Mario one was released in 2007, and it was only through the Club Nintendo service that you could acquire this set. So once a person accumulated 400 points in Japan, they could get the Mario cards for free. Let's see here. Next slide is, what's interesting is there was a deck called the Daitoru Hanafuda set, which was manufactured in 1889. And believe it or not, they're Nintendo's most successful Hanafuda deck that's being produced even till today. And it features the portrait of Napoleon, which is really odd. So today, the box in which the deck comes in is made of a plastic material, whereas the original cards were placed in a beautifully crafted wooden box. So I think what happened is they were saying that there was a confusion, and the founder of Nintendo actually thought that Napoleon was the president of, he was mistaking him for George Washington somehow. So that's how, you know, his image ended up on the cover of this Nintendo gaming box. And let's see here, I'm just going to go through. So later, yeah, so basically that version, that box is still available today, and I actually brought one with me, so you can have a look at it later. I'll just basically go over some of the gameplay mechanics that you might want to think about when you're kind of, you know, investigating Hanafuda or playing it. But, you know, some of the things you might want to think about are dealing. You know, how is the dealer decided and what role do they have? Is there an advantage to becoming the dealer? Also, card drafting, which is, you know, choosing cards from the rows in the field and that are already face up. Scoring, some players might be better at calculating points in their heads and using suits to score more points in the end. Matching, so thinking about how do visual thinkers find it easier to quickly find matches. And communication between players. Is there a conversation, you know, happening when the game is being played, or is it strictly competitive? And one thing I'm going to show you later on is a little video, and you'll be able to really hear the ASMR, which is really fun. So I like to consider sound as well, and then what movement cards make, especially too when you're thinking about other cultures, like for instance mahjong, you know, in the Chinese culture as well, the clicking of the tiles or the clacking of the tiles. The next slide is why I got interested in Hanafuda cards, actually, is the Reading the Migration Library is a long-running artist project by Lois Klassen, and it's made up of events and publications about migration and displacement. Its third and final series is called RML3, Undercurrents and Folds, and was just released and it's produced by both Lois and Deanna Chong. There are 6 publications in the series of creative responses to topics of displacement, diaspora, arrivals and failed arrivals, arrivants, travel over sovereign indigenous territory, and the violence of forcible containment caused by colonizing states. So I was asked to do an artist book for this series, and I did. So basically what I did, my idea took inspiration from Hanafuda cards, and in conceptualizing ideas around it, I went back to memories that, you know, we had as young kids, as descendants of immigrant working class families, where we used to play card games for the most part of our entertainment growing up. It was a way to sort of share discussion as a group collectively, because you had at least one other person to join you, unless you were playing solitaire, of course. But you know, I noticed that I'm also Chinese as well as being Japanese. So on the Chinese side of my family, we played mahjong a lot as well. With mahjong, you know, it was easy to recognize the symbols And Mahjong was also played as sort of an intergenerational game with my grandparents and the rest of my siblings as well. So in recreating this Hanafuda set that I made myself, where I drew the images and did up the text, I looked back at the card game that has been used and thought about the interment again, like going back to the interment too, but the interment of 1945 and subsequent years, thinking about the connection that I would have to each of the cards. So I chose the cards specifically and put some text on the back that had some meaning to me. So some of the text is actually archival text, which was found in papers owned by my grandparents during the Japanese internment in BC. So some of the sets that I had were like flower cards. I had 4 sets of flower cards. I had some cards that had birds on them, some with animals, and of course the Joker card. There are sea creatures, religion and peace, food and drink, flying insects, toys and figurines, and fruit. And we did an exhibition actually at Center A and at Word Vancouver, where print copies of Reading Migration Library or artist books were available by exchange at events or by mail. So if you made a zine, a chapbook, an artist book, any kind of mail art, small press publication, I even gave away one with one of my friends made a song on the topic of migration or diaspora, or basically for me, it was kind of anything. It can be exchanged for any of the limited edition print copies. Once you received it, your exchanges were posted on Lois's RML website. So thinking about game playing motives, in the American Sociological Review in 1956, a scholar mentioned that for card playing, there are usually 3 major motives. So one is around motivation around the game and the reward of winning, of course. And this type is more like the gambler type, interested in the monetary reward and seeing it as an exciting and a stimulating activity or skill-based and they're attracted by the challenge. The other one would be like a group affiliation, wanting that sense of belonging, that sense of being part of a group and just enjoying play around leisure time. Not so interested in winning or skill building, but doing it for the spirit of the game and companionship. It's sort of, obviously an inexpensive form of entertainment and an alternative to going out. And then the last one is a social status, so acceptance, recognition, and prestige. Players of this type consider it to be a social asset, to be accepted in groups and perceived to have a higher status, like at clubs or parties. They're accidental players and not really that interested in the game sometimes. So the deck that I made for the Reading the Migration Library is a Hanafuda-inspired deck, as I mentioned, and some of the cards are flower cards and are representative of that aspect of Japan that I came across on my visit to my ancestral homelands or through literature. One of the suits in the deck that I love the most, which comprises the majority of the cards in Hanafuda, are the flower cards, and the word Hanakatoba means the Japanese form of the language of flowers. So each flower has distinct meanings and can convey a range of emotions to people and is an indispensable element to the spirit and culture of the Japanese people. Flower symbolism is often utilized to represent meanings in history, Zen Buddhism, and cultural aspects as well. When I was last in Japan, I went to Kyoto and I was really excited. Oops, oh, yeah, there we go. I was really excited. I went to the Fushimi Inari area, which is where the Kyoto Oishi Tengu Do, a long-established Karudo store, was founded in the 1800s. They have several types of cards there. And they also have like Hanafuda frame pictures. They make other traditional games as well, like Go and other Karuda. With a handful of exceptions, all their cards are still made by hand. You can see in the picture some of the older Hanafuda cards that they have in a frame. The company itself says they were founded under the name Minatoya in 1800 during the Edo period when they were both selling and using Hanafuda. And cards and gambling actually was illegal back then. To get around this, they covered their business up by saying they were a rice merchant. And the production and selling of Hanafuda and other cards strictly happened under the counter. So in the 1930s, the company had 30 employees. In 2000, that number had been reduced to only 6 because the demand for Hanafuda decreased in the mid-1970s, and the market was largely dominated by Nintendo, who began mass producing Hanafuda cards. So this company is one of the few traditional playing card manufacturers that has still been able to survive, but thanks to a silent boom in their card sales. So the company is small, but it's held its market in terms of sales since 2000. And here's a little video. I think, should it work? Yes. Oh, okay. Is there any way to show the actual sound or? I don't think so. Okay. Well, I would play act the ASMR for you and just. No. Okay. So the sound was really cool. So I encourage you to go online and check that out. And actually, this part here is really fun too because it's almost like a clacking sound of the cards on the table there. Anyways, please use your imagination. I'm sure you're all very creative. Okay, so, oh, now how do I get to this next slide here? There we go. Okay, so let's see. The next thing I'm going to just mention quickly is that, you know, there's been a lot of sort of pairings that the studio had done with different organizations. So one of them was with Studio Ghibli, which I know you're all aware of. And they're the only commercial manufacturer that recently began producing some of these early sort of cards that were played in Japan. And so that there's a Hanafuda set that they did in collaboration with Studio Ghibli that has illustrations of characters from the movie Spirited Away. So each of the 48 cards has some sort of nod to the film. You can see my favorite here, No Face, hanging out under the bough of a tree at the bottom there. As an example, just of the price range, for this kind of collector's deck, you can find it for $50 on eBay, for example. And a regular set of Hanafuda cards goes for around $20. And that's that. So when I was at the shop in Kyoto, I asked if there are any decks that were special to the owner, and he pointed me towards this set of original Hanafuda cards that they actually made in the shop there, of course, that show famous Kyoto places and things. So it's very specific, place specific. With this deck, they actually encourage you to make up your own rules, which is one of the things I also like about Hanafuda, is there are many different sets of rules. Hanafuda in popular culture, you might have seen it in some of the anime movies or things that you've watched. One of the ones is called Summer Wars, and it's about a character named Love Machine using a specific hand during the Koi Koi Hanafuda life or death battle. There's even a scene that was, or even a set of cards that was made specifically for the movie. And there are also references to Hanafuda in the One Piece anime series. So quite often as well, you'll see it pop up as a mini game too. So in video games like Yakuza and other Yakuza games, you'll see it kind of pop up. So there's like a little screenshot there of it showing in Yakuza 3. It's also popular in manga as well. So one of the other mangas is Demon Slayer. And one of the main characters actually has Hanafuda cards as earrings in that manga. So finally, I'm going to mention this quote by Japanese scholar and researcher Ibashi Takashi. They hope that through studying and handling the Edo period Karuta, you will also sense the warmth and inherit the memory of that era. Karuta is a pass for historians to travel beyond space and time. And that's it. Thank you very much. Oh, and I'll have some decks of cards and things you can have a look at later too.
Thank you so much for your presentations. One of the reasons why we invite people to talk about these various gaming cultures is to really learn about the mechanics and what makes these games unique. And hearing about the way that knowledge is disseminated through these card game practices is really fascinating because you both get at that. You talk about how individual symbolism, but also these archetypes through tarot pass knowledge down. And this is a history of card games that I'm not familiar with that also became a project for you in exploring your history. So thank you for that. I don't know if we were going to invite you up to the top table to answer questions. So if you'd like to sit up there, and then we'll have a few questions. I know I have some from the students that I've been collecting, but we also have other guests in our audience. So please take a seat. Does anybody have any? I mean, I have a question that I ask all of our presenters, and so maybe we'll begin with that. And it's around This lecture series is on games and social justice. And so what is important for you both when thinking about card games in particular? Card games, and I know that tarot is also a spiritual practice, but it is also a card game that is historically drawn from the tarot cards, and then the basis for a lot of card games that we play in the Western world as well. So thinking about tarot as a game, but more as a practice, like what does bringing that in dialogue with social justice do for both of you? Would you like to speak first, Laura?
Yeah, I think maybe I mentioned throughout that like I had tarot as a tool through my childhood and through my teen years, but it was in my 20s when I was you know, taking women's studies classes for the first time here at UBC, and really exploring what it meant to be openly queer for the first time in my life, and to find direction for myself. That tarot, especially because of the friend who gifted me this deck, we were in conversation about this together. So this was something that my friend and I did together, and I think understanding where I sat in the great web of things and understanding my own story in relation to conversations about social justice and histories of oppression and systems, like this was all a tool to help me understand that, because it is very overwhelming to understand yourself, and especially like my Japanese Canadian heritage, understanding where I sit in that story of oppression and how are we moving forward from that. What are we doing next? I think that particularly with Japanese Canadian history, like we do talk about internment a lot, and there's been over 80 years since then. And so now in our communities, we're like, great, how do we move past this? How are we healing together? So you know, there's one thing about understanding the history and then also embodying it and moving forward. That for me, this has been a tool to help me do that.
Well, I think for card playing games in particular, I think it's like a way to build community. You know, it's I had read an article that had mentioned that card playing games actually made a big comeback during the pandemic, which I think was really interesting. People want that form of social connection. They really miss it. And also that sort of physicality as well. So like, you know, you can do video stuff, you know, only for so long. Sometimes when you actually crave being in the same room as another person, you know, just having that sense of community building. And then also just like, you know, it sort of explores, card game also opens up a dialogue basically. So it's nice to have sort of dialogue, you know, amongst, you know, one other person or just even in group. So I know that, you know, sometimes when, like, for instance, when my mom gets lonely, she craves playing mahjong. You know, she's like, hey, we're going to set up the mahjong table, you know, that kind of thing. Because there's that sort of physicality with mahjong as you're moving the tiles around that sometimes you accidentally hit someone's hand or something, you know, those kinds of things. That's just part of the game. You know, and even in Chinatown community, one good example is, you know, what they do with mahjong in that community there. They have these sort of mahjong nights where they bring intergenerational groups of people together. And there's a lot of, you know, game playing going on, but also socializing. And like, you know, they add in different things like karaoke, you know, but then at the same time, it's a group that brilliantly, to their credit, actually also got together under the same guise to oppose a building that was going to be built, or that is actually being built right now at 105 Kiefer Street. So like those kinds of like things are just like, you know, card games might seem like a simple thing, but it actually, you know, has a way of building community to fight for things like social justice, like, you know, outside of just, gameplay mechanics and things like that. Oh, yeah.
So that's fantastic. I'm really glad that I asked these two questions of all of our speakers because we hear different kinds of answers. And what I'm hearing from the both of you, cards are tools to bring people together. Cards are tools for self-reflection versus other gaming cultures. We've heard a lot about how narratives and representation are so important for different communities. And so it's quite striking to see where the intersections are as we move through different media. That leads me into a question we have from one of our students about whether or not, or what happens when you make these forms digital. And I think you spoke a little bit to that, but the way you raised your eyebrows, I think also, you raised your eyebrows, Laura, you're like, digital. Like, what does that rob the medium? Can you make it digital? Can you make it meaningful digitally?
I mean, this is tough. I also grew up on the internet, so I had a lot of communities online when I was a child. I won't share the anecdote, but that's how I got to Vancouver. I had an internet friend. Yeah, there is something quite tactile about the cards. It is, I think it's meaningful for me, a magpie, to own beautiful objects. I like to have the physical thing. I like to make pretty things to put my pretty things in. But if it were online, like there are a ton of communities online. Like I'm sure there's some kind of tarot card generator thing online. Um, yeah. It's how you use it and it's how you relate to it from my perspective. I'm sure you might have different thoughts, but yeah, there's like all sorts of people like Chani Nicholas has like birth charts and astrology and horoscopes and all of that happen online and people take meaning from it. But I like the tactile myself.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I'm more about the tactile. I find that, for events that we're doing, like for instance, that I work at the library too, I find that people are really missing that community thing right now. So I do a speed friending event and people are just like coming out like crazy. I think during the pandemic, we were all sort of shut in so much that it's just kind of like made us realize how important in-person connections are. I think, it is interesting because the Hanafuda cards, they are actually mini games with inside a video game, which is like this, I don't know, kind of like meta version, I guess, or whatever. But I think it probably, they do happen. They do have them obviously online, but I just don't think there would be that real warmth or that real, the conversation I think is missing, and just the actual, I don't know, maybe just even that sort of sense of, competitive nature that can be brought out more fruitfully, maybe in person. You have, the sort of jabbing or the, that you go back and forth with someone. I think that's what would be missing, I think, for online versions.
The family fighting.
Yeah. Oh my God. That reminds me of the family fighting in Mahjong. Hilarious. Oh my God. That's like, you have to experience it once in your lifetime. I mean, it's like, yeah.
That's Settlers of Catan in my household.
Okay.
Yeah. We all have that board game. Yes, question from the audience.
Yeah.
I've never actually used or made meaning with tarot cards, but I was curious because I feel that when you try to make meaning from tarot, it would be very effective if you are doing that yourself. Like you have cards to guide you, and then your unconscious is kind of making the decision for you, and you just provide your unconscious with a way of interpreting your life, and maybe that is how you can actually understand what you need to do in the future. But then with tarot, I don't really understand how it ties with the idea that someone is telling you kind of your fate, and that's what I don't understand. Someone tell
Okay.
guiding you
Yeah.
and not yourself.
Thank you for your question. When I was younger and I read tarot for other people, like you're at a house party, you're like, hey, I got my tarot cards. You want me to read tarot cards for you? there's at least one person who I still know from around theater. And he sat there with his arms folded and frowning at me the whole time. And I was kind of like, do you want me to do this or not? Because I think he was trying to like catch me out and not give me anything. Which is why I'm like, I'm not like trying to pull a fast one. I'm not trying to say this is how it will be. And I think a lot of people don't trust it for that reason. And like, that's totally fair. Like you don't have to say like, this is the future. This is the thing that will happen. And I think that there are so many variables that last card that you pull that is meant to represent the future is like one possible outcome. And so if I do read cards for somebody now, I have a whole, like, I basically am like, okay, sign this release form, sign this. I'm not responsible for whatever these cards will show you, or what you take from them, because ultimately it's how you are interpreting it. And you could, and like sometimes I'll pull something and I'll be like, I don't know what that means. Maybe I'll figure it out later. So it's fun to like take a picture and then go back. And it's also a form of journaling for me as well. Like I know a lot of friends will do like a New Year's Day spread and kind of look ahead through their year and say, what shall happen this year? I don't know. So does that answer your question?
If you like mention it verbally, but it's how you interpret it. Like when
Yeah.
you're reading cards for somebody, you're making it like your language is not very like strict. You just give this for interpretation.
Yes, yeah. And ultimately what you see in the cards or what someone else sees, like if I'm reading for somebody, I'm guiding them, but these are all things that like I'm not revealing anything that isn't already known to another person. I'm kind of like, you don't have to tell me what you think this means, but does it mean something to you or not? You know, and then if it doesn't mean something, then we can like explore what that might mean together. Yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah, I think of tarot as a way of empowering intuition of the reader and of the querent. Is that the right word? The person who's being read to. Like, and that's why I see it as a form of shared storytelling, because you work together to find the meaning in the cards, which isn't always located in the book that comes along with your tarot card. It might be part of a journey that you're exploring in yourself. Yeah. Do we have any other students? Oh, yes, please.
You mentioned that Hanafuda, I saw in the last quote, is a way, as a pass for historians to pass through space and time to see Japanese culture and experiences born before. What do you think that modern card games or even just media in general can take from this quote to almost approach this way of becoming a pass for historians almost in ways?
Sorry, I kind of missed the last little bit of the question just because
How cards can become a path through which historians can reflect on both the contemporary moment and the historical moment.
In like modern, in almost like modern media or card games, for example.
So how
sort
modern
of
media are doing this work that you see
Ah.
located in historical versions of these decks.
How would they almost approach that? How would they do?
And how would they do that work if they wanted to? How could
Uh,
they be a tool for history from the contemporary moment?
Yeah, I think I think one good example was the card company that's still actually in making cards in Kyoto. They are still keeping tradition and culture alive. So, they're continuously partnering with, more pop culture, anime movies and just like other organizations to make new decks, which I think is really cool. So they're sort of reviving the popularity of Hanafuda now. And as most of you probably know, Japan's riding this wave of popularity right now, which is huge. And so people are going to Kyoto and other places in Japan, just trying to grab at any kind of, cultural reference or anything. So I think the card set that they were doing in Kyoto is really interesting in that it's actually showing, some of the more popular tourist destinations and some of the more popular things that people are interested in Japan. So as for some of the other places, I think that, I don't really know too much about I know that there's a lot of at least, different kinds of cards in Western culture, like Magic, the Gathering, and things like that. But I'm not quite as familiar with those. But I think that, there is a sense of like you were mentioning about storytelling. And so I think that is a huge hook for people to be interested in this kind of like, card playing again. And so I just hope that that new decks will be made. And, what's interesting too is like artists, like myself, but others too, are just taking it upon themselves to make their own decks. So that's like a culturally sort of empowering thing you can do as well. So you could make your own deck and, make it important to you, and you can devise your own rules. That's one of the things I like about games is you don't have to play by, a certain set of rules. And especially Hanafuda, there's multiple different kinds of ways that you can play the game, ways of scoring and everything like that. So I think it's like sort of empowering to make your own deck, or to like, advocate for other decks that you might want to see out there. So hopefully that some of that will happen.
That's a great request to this group of students, because part of their work is to imagine games based on our learning over the course of the semester. And so maybe this is a challenge to you in particular to work on finding a way to use contemporary games to provide that path through history. Yeah.
For example, I was like, I have so many Pokemon cards from my childhood. I could build a tarot deck out of Pokemon cards. That would be great. I would love that. No, and just to jump off that, like this deck, the Pride Tarot, each of the artists have written beautiful. Here, I'll open it. Beautiful quotations and little write-ups about each of their cards to go along with it, and to make it like explicitly queer and have queer imagery, and ask for those from all of these different artists to interpret like what was initially like the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is really like Judeo-Christian imagery to kind of queer it a bit. It's beautiful. I'll put some of those on the camera.
Do we have any more questions from our audience? That connects very much with another question from a student that I had submitted around the role of these card games and card practices as tools to challenge oppressive power structures. And I think you've already identified some of the ways that this happens. And I just think that you've spoke so well to the how card games can intervene in some of these discourses through the developing of new tools and the accessibility to make your own decks. I hope that students take that to heart when they're thinking of what is a game I can actually make for an assignment in class that won't take me weeks. But I also want to keep some time so that people can explore your decks before they head down to the classroom. I'm going to share the questions from the students with you personally, and you're welcome to respond. I've been posting responses to student questions also on our class site, so you're welcome to respond to these questions, and I'll pass it on to the students. But in the interim, I want people to be able to handle the materiality of these card game and card practices. So I'm going to thank you both sincerely for sharing your knowledge, your art, your experiences, and let's give you a round of applause. I can't clap. And thank you to those of you who joined us online. I'm sorry you can't touch the cards.